Do you have a dream? Have you unfinished business with a nagging endurance goal? Have you stood on the sideline of a race or an event and wondered, how do they do it? Could I ever? I'm here to tell you that you can. Aren't we lucky to live in this amazing place? It probably means you're already taking really good care of yourself and you're doing a good job of being active and healthy. But living in this town, you'd be forgiven for having a really warped impression of what it means to be fit. The bar is really high. When we arrived here in 2002, I was the only triathlete. This was a ski town, and there were a few hardy multi-sporters. And now that's been completely flipped on its end. From my perspective, I think we're an endorphin-crazed endurance town with a small winter distraction of skiing through our quiet off-season. Where else do you meet people who go, I'm just going to do a half marathon, or I'm only going to ride the bike leg? Wanaka is the home of people who summit Everest. We have people who live here who have been to the Olympics. We have the champions of coast to coast, Ironman, Challenge, people who race at World Champs events, people who stand on podiums, people that race and cover staggering distances over days on end in endurance races and ultra marathons. We are far from a normal community. My journey to bring you before you here today started when I was small, and Dad reminded me, you're just warming up when you get to the end of the 100 metres, Merryn. I was better at cross country. As a teenager, I ran behind the lawnmower, and I thought the dream jobs were the milk boy and the rubbish man because they got to run for their money. I've had nearly 20 years as a triathlete. I raced to complete. I've raced to compete. And I had a short period of time as a professional, but it didn't last so long. My need to give back was greater. And at the moment, I have a broken foot, which I broke in March. And what I've learnt through coming through this process of recovery and getting back to some exercise again is how good it feels to fill your lungs, your heart pounding in your chest, your muscles and joints working your body through a greater range of motion, sweat prickling on your skin and the air moving over my face, and the high that you get afterwards when your brain is buzzing with all those feel-good hormones. Try to notice these small things when you next go out and do what it is you love to do in this amazing place that we live in. Your starting point to achieving the impossible is the moment when you are sparked to turn a dream or a wish into something that you are going to make happen. Athletes sometimes come to me with a secret goal and a wish and a question. Do you think I can? And the journey begins because they now have the mindset to achieve what they've set out to achieve. And this is the number one ingredient you need to making the impossible possible. In the year before the first challenge in Wanaka, we were working with an athlete who wanted to complete that event. He was no stranger to endurance sport. He was one of those multi-sporters in town when we arrived. But his experience with water had always been on top, with a buoyancy vest. He couldn't swim. So he had to learn to swim in order to complete this goal. And in the week before the race, we met together to swim the course, and that's what you often do. It's one of the last pieces that you put together before you're ready to race. But we didn't finish that. He got about a third of the way into his swim, and he was overwhelmed with a panic attack. These things happen quite often. And at that point, well, when at some moment you put your face into the water, something in your brain says, I'm going to drown. And your heart rate goes up and your breathing starts to pant and you lift your head and your hips and feet go down and your movements become jerky and rapid and all good reasoning flies out the window and everything unravels. I spend quite a lot of time with my athletes before their races ensuring that they're confident to take on the water. It not only means that they can swim well, but also they've got skills to be able to deal with what happens when the panic starts to bubble up. And the big thing you need to remember is you must breathe out. So amazing things happened in that week because he went on and finished his first challenge, and now he has a 10-year history or career as a triathlete. He's raced all over the world, but he still has panic attacks. But because he's got the burn in here, he's prepared time and time again to put himself back in that water and face his demons. In 2006, I qualified to race the World Ironman Champs in Hawaii. And back in those days, our little pool used to shut between May and September, and my race was in October. So how are we going to get ready for a 3.8k swim if you can't swim in your pool? We got a swimming machine, and I swam every morning in front of breakfast TV in the lounge room and felt quite chuffed when I arrived in Hawaii ready to race. In the days before the race, I was training on the course and some cyclists sidled up next to me and we got chatting. And the fellow next to me shared with me that he had had bowel cancer and he was going to race in the same race as me with a colostomy bag. And somebody else I met in those days prior to the race who had come from a densely populated South American city, I forget where, his geographical and safety constraints meant that he had a 1 square kilometre block that he could train around, and he ran in one direction and he biked in the other to get ready for a 180k bike ride in a marathon. I think he went outside of the city to do his long sessions. But what I learnt from these stories is that everyone has their story. And everybody's got their thing that they've struggled with to overcome to get to their starting line. So don't let anybody talk you out of how great your accomplishment is. But they've all achieved what they set out to do because they've got it up here. They've got it burning. And if it burns here, you can be capable of pretty much anything. My first triathlon only really happened because somebody came into the shop that I was working in and I had become friendly, and he said, "Merryn, there's a triathlon coming up. It's in about 3 weeks' time. I'll lend you a wetsuit, I'll teach you how to open water swim, and I'll give you a few tips so you can get going." The rest is history. So really, without his enthusiasm and motivation at the time, who knows where I would have been or where I would be now. So I really think it's important that you have a coach on your shoulder, somebody, an experienced other, a mentor. And that person helps you focus your goal. They'll help you define it. We tend not to work with people who want to get fitter or want to lose weight or want to go faster, because how do you know when you've got there? And how do you actually know how you're going to get there? So if you've set yourself a goal of, I'm going to run 5Ks in this race, or it might be a marathon, it really doesn't matter what your goal is, no matter how big or small, set yourself an event, you're more likely to get there. My job as coach is to help reframe the goal when the roadblocks arise. I provide accountability to people to help them stay motivated. We help people find shortcuts. We straighten the path a little bit towards their goal. I worked with a lady who came to me, and at the time her capability was about 15 kilometres on her bike, and she said, "Do you think I could ride the Bike Legan Challenge?" And that's 90 Ks. So I asked her, "How would you eat an elephant?" One small bite at a time. So I helped her focus on the small things that she could do every day that would help her achieve what at that time for her was impossible. The risks of not having a mentor or an experienced other to guide you or help you find your way basically revolve around the idea of falling off the path and not knowing how to get back on. You might experience injury, some people burn out. The lack of accountability may mean that you lose all your motivation. You might do too much of something, you may do not enough of the right things, you might do a whole lot of stuff really inefficiently. So your mentor helps to fast track your learning. Oops, too soon. My role is about helping my athletes build confidence. And people that you see in races may often appear to be really confident, but many of them have huge self-doubts. So we talk about how you might have a coach on one shoulder and a critic that sits on your other. And I suggest to people that they set up a positive savings bank. where they record all the positives, big and small, that they experience along their journey, so that when the critic starts to niggle in your ear, your coach has a great big long list of things that you know to be true that they can proclaim really loudly to overwhelm this critic and get them off your shoulder. I really value the person-to-person communication in my role. I see that it strengthens an athlete's commitment to their goal because they know that I too have committed to their goals. And the process of handing responsibility to somebody else means that all they have to do is focus on the one thing they have to do that day, knowing that the big picture is taken care of. Go. So having the burn here and in here is part of achieving your endurance goal, but I think you do need a home and a work life that enables you to get the training done. There will be times in your life when there isn't enough time to get the training done, but mostly I see that people can sustain two stresses in life at times. That could be work and training, and your home life is simmering along happily. But if something pops up at home that also demands your attention, that's where the coach comes into the picture to help you readjust the balance so that things don't come unravelled. And the other speakers have already spoken about that tonight too. A lady that I worked with had for too long given too much of herself to her work and her family, and as often as seen her own health had suffered. And so I felt that for her, the hardest part of her challenge for the endurance goal that she had chosen was actually the mindset shift to put her goal as number one. But 6 weeks after she began her training journey, she came to me and she said how much more energy she had at work. And what was really lovely to hear about was that her husband had offered to join her for her long training sessions in the weekend. And her kids sometimes went out with her after school for some of her shorter training sessions. So there were all these lovely quality home times or quality family time moments that were developing out of this lady's decision to put her health and well-being first by taking on an endurance goal. Another lady that I worked with, as Nikki just talked about, was having too many coffees during the day, a few too many wines in the evening to wind back down, a little bit of smoking in the weekend as well, some social cigarettes at the parties. Her balance was out of whack, and so she began with some small running goals, which became a 10k goal, and then a half marathon goal, and then there was a marathon. But what happened along the way was that her husband was inspired to stop smoking, and he then took an interest in taking himself for some walks. And so what I think is wonderful is you often think that an endurance goal might mean a whole lot of sacrifice, but it's really important to notice how much inspiration you can provide people by choosing to strive for a goal. And the change that you effect in your own life can radiate to the people around you, and the influence can be quite wide-reaching. Endurance sport can be sometimes a really lonely journey. I remember shedding tears of fear before I went out for my first 6-hour bike ride. And there was somebody in my life for a not very long time who said, "Run, it's way faster to drive." You need some training companions. They become essential to making the journey easier. In that winter of 2006, I was really grateful for that group of multi-sporters who I'd become friends with. These guys, a group of them, were 15 to 20 years older than me, quite different stages of their lives, but without them, the training may not have happened. It might have been really hard, it could have been shorter, probably less committed, or maybe not at all. And one day we met together, there were 10 of us, and there were some dark clouds looming. And by the time we got to Hawea, it was pelting down snow. And so I think anybody else, if they were on their own, we probably would have called for a lift. But we put the one guy with the front light in the front, and we put the one guy with the tail light at the back, and we all lined up, and we tucked in behind, and we got home safely. And it remains one of the most memorable rides ever of my training. So these guys soften any of the impacts that you can meet along the way. I work alongside a coach called Val Burke, And in 2009, she set up something which has now become an institution. It's a Wednesday night run group, and there were 10 of us when we first started. And last spring when we kicked off, it was kind of sideways raining. And as coaches, we were standing there waiting, thinking, could be hard tonight. Energy is probably going to be a bit flat. Maybe not many people are going to turn up. And we were prepared to have to turn on the energy and create some false sunshine. We had 50 people turn up in brightly coloured raincoats, and we had a great time and we ran hard, and we didn't notice the weather because we were all together. I coach individual swimmers, and last year I realised I was repeating a lot of the same messages to all these individual swimmers. So I brought them together in a mini squad. And each week I have these amazing moments where somebody will be ploughing down the lane, working really hard, focusing on what I've asked them to think about. And they'll stick their head up and they'll groan or they'll gasp or they'll curse me. And then the person next to them will go, I know, or, oh yeah, I felt that. And if you do this, blah, blah, blah. And so I notice, or I'm aware that as a coach, when I'm standing poolside, clothed, and I've done quite a bit of swimming, so I'm more experienced generally than the person I'm working with, that there can be quite a big disconnect between me and that person who's in the water, maybe quite scared, and definitely not wearing very much. So the point of being in the water together with a group instantly dissolves all of that disconnection, because your peers, or their peers in that case, share the obstacles with you. So they no longer become as big or remain as big. Your relationships in sport transcend age, gender, your job, how much you earn, what you drive. Your teammates not only keep you company, but they motivate and inspire you. They help you get the best out of yourself, and then most importantly, they get you. And that builds self-esteem, your confidence in your ability to succeed, and this in turn improves your overall health and well-being. Small changes, big impact. Is there one ingredient that you are missing to enable you to achieve something that you consider impossible? The first thing that you must do is decide. And the rest becomes easy because of your commitment to achieving your goal. Start a positive savings bank. It might be your head that's holding you back. Does the critic have too much to say? Who's on your team? Surround yourself with people who support your journey. Find a coach. Share your goal with your friends. Enlist your family. Sign up some teammates. Do you need to give yourself permission to do something for yourself? It may appear selfish to prioritise your goal, but you mustn't overlook the example that you provide to those around you of how life-changing it can be to strive towards a goal. And the motivation and the inspiration that you provide them can be far beyond anything that you realise. Remember, if you put your mind to it, you can be capable of anything.